Good day. I am Jisril Aguilar with Aubrey Mendoza, Group 4, to be presenting Unit 2, Module 2, Rationalism and Empiricism. Since rationalism and empiricism are both epistemological views, let's define epistemology. It is the philosophical study of the nature, origins, and limitations of human knowledge, sometimes referred to as the theory of knowledge. Epistemology comes from two Greek words that means knowledge and reason. Rationalism and empiricism are the two major traditions in modern philosophy, each represented by three philosophers. To do a comparative analysis on rationalism and empiricism, we are going to use the three central issues in epistemology, because all theories of knowledge from the ancient times to the present must provide an answer to these central issues. The first would be, what is the source or sources of knowledge? Second is, given the source, what can be known? And last is, how do we validate our knowledge claims? To start with our rationalist philosophers, we have René Descartes, who paved the way for the rationalist school of thought. He believed that everyone could tell true from false by the natural light of reason. In his writings in Discourse on Method, he illustrated his method for utilizing reason in the search of truth in sciences, where he explained the law of refraction, the rainbow, and analytical geometry. He is also well known for his quote or his idea, "I think, therefore I am." Our second rationalist philosopher, Baruch Spinoza, is a Dutch Jewish philosopher who pioneered biblical criticism and argued that the Bible should be interpreted and analyzed with the same linguistic instruments as any other historical record. He also believed that divinely created laws of nature cannot be altered by human or divine means, so violations of these divine laws, such as miracles, are impossible. He states that scientific developments will explain all alleged miracles once all of the laws of nature have been discovered. One of his most well-known works, Tractatus Theologico-Politicus, combines biblical criticism, political philosophy, and philosophy of religion. Lastly, we have Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who is a German philosopher, mathematician, political advisor, metaphysician, and logician, most known for his invention of the differential and integral calculus independent from Isaac Newton. Now, those three philosophers mentioned represent rationalism. So what is rationalism? Rationalism is based on reason and strong evidence. And rationalists believe that reason is the only source of knowledge, and the type of knowledge it can guarantee is formal knowledge found in formal sciences such as algebra, mathematics, and logic. Rationalists believed in only one theory of truth, which is the coherence theory of truth. And in rationalism, the five senses are not considered to be genuine sources of knowledge, for rationalists believe that the five senses are unreliable, unstable, or contradictory. They support these criticisms by giving examples of perceptual illusions. The first example would be how towers appear shorter from a distance, but when you go nearer, they're actually taller. The second would be an oar half submerged in water appears bent, but in fact, it is not. It's similar to the examples physics teacher give you when describing behavior of light on how a pencil half submerged in water looks bent when it's not. The third example would be mountains that appear blue from a distance, but they're not actually blue. And the last example would be railroad tracks that appear to converge at a certain distance, but they're actually parallel all the way. So, by stating these examples of perceptual illusions, rationalists support their argument that the five senses are an unreliable, unstable, and even contradictory source of knowledge.
Alright, let's take a look at the three big thinkers who really put empiricism on the map. We'll start with the first one, John Locke. He was born way back on August 29, 1632 in Rington, Somerset, England, and passed away on October 28, 1704 in High Lover, Essex. Locke was not just an English philosopher but also a political theorist. He's often called the founder of British empiricism, and is known for being the first to systematically lay out and defend the ideas behind political liberalism. Among John Locke's most influential works are an essay concerning human understanding, which was published in 1689. In this book, he really developed his ideas about where our thoughts come from and how all our knowledge starts with our experiences. Another key piece is two treatises of government. The first edition came out in 1690, though much of it was written earlier. Here, he argues for a system of government based on the natural rights and freedoms of individuals, where the government's authority comes from the consent of the people it governs. When it came to epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, Locke argued against the idea that we're born with certain innate thoughts. Instead, he showed that pretty much all our ideas, except for some minor unimportant ones, come from either our senses or sensation, or from reflecting on our own minds or reflection. He also suggested that knowledge itself is about recognizing connections or agreements between these ideas. For the second thinker, George Berkeley, he was born on March 12, 1685, close to Dysart Castle, and passed away on January 14, 1753, in Oxford, England. He was a prominent figure as an Anglo-Irish bishop, philosopher, and scientist. He is particularly known for his influential empiricist and idealist philosophies. Berkeley began his studies at Trinity College, Dublin in 1700 and became a fellow there by 1707. His philosophical stance involved rejecting the idea of material substance while affirming the existence of spiritual substance. Among his notable works are an essay towards a new theory of vision, in 1709, a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, Part 1, in 1710, and the three dialogues between Hylas and Philonos in 1713. In 1724, he took on the role of Dean of Derry. Berkeley put forth the idea that reality is made up only of minds and their ideas, suggesting that everything except the spiritual realm exists only insofar as it is perceived through the senses. In his significant work, a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, Berkeley argued that physical objects are essentially collections of sensible ideas. Since ideas can only exist within a mind, objects can only exist when they are perceived. Berkeley maintained that he was simply describing the common sense view of reality. He supported his thesis by pointing out that physical things are perceived by our senses and things perceived by our senses are ideas. Therefore, physical things are essentially ideas. Finally, let's talk about David Hume. He was born on May 7, 1711 in Edinburgh, Scotland, and passed away there on August 25, 1776. Hume was a prominent Scottish philosopher, historian, economist, and essayist, celebrated particularly for his philosophical empiricism and skepticism. He was well known for his elegant writing style, his bold empiricism, his skepticism regarding religion, his critical examination of causation, and his naturalistic approach to understanding the mind. Think about the word empiricism for a moment. At its heart, it's a really straightforward idea. It's all about gaining knowledge through what we observe and experience directly. Consider learning to ride a bike, for instance. You didn't just learn it by reading a manual. You actually got on the bike, maybe fell a few times, kept trying, and through that hands-on lived experience, you picked up a new skill and a new kind of understanding. That's pretty much what empiricism is all about. Now, there's a common misunderstanding that empiricist philosophers completely ignore logic or reason, but that's simply not the case. Actually, as the slide highlights, they fully acknowledge that reason is a valid source of knowledge. Their main point is that our understanding of the physical world, the world around us, has to start with our senses. We use reason and logic later on to make sense of and organize the information our senses provide us. This leads us to the third key idea. If we want to know anything about the physical world, we absolutely must rely on our five senses, even if they're not always perfectly reliable or can sometimes be off. The only way we gather these basic bits of information is through touching, tasting, smelling, seeing, and hearing. Empiricists believe that these senses are our main ways of connecting with reality. Your hand, your ear, your nose, your eye, and your mouth, these aren't just biological parts doing their jobs. In the view of empiricism, they are the absolute foundation of what we understand. They are the starting point for everything we come to know about the universe around us. So now that we've touched on the basics of empiricism, let's take a closer look at one of its key players, David Hume. You can see his portrait right there. Hume really took the core ideas of empiricism and pushed them into some pretty new and radical territory. Hume famously believed that knowledge didn't just come from our five senses. He also considered our passions and emotions as important sources. He argued that these internal experiences, our feelings and desires, are just as real and immediate as the things we sense in the outside world. To him, they were fundamental ingredients for what he called impressions. This idea leads us to his famous distinction between two types of perceptions, which are impressions and ideas. Impressions are those lively, immediate experience we have, like the sharp sting of a pinprick or the bright red color of an apple. Ideas, conversely, are like fainter copies of these impressions that we hold in our minds, such as a memory of that pain or just the thought of that apple. According to Hume, every idea we have must ultimately trace back to some original impression. Understanding this difference is really important to grasp what Hume meant by his two big categories of knowledge claims, which are relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas are things that are logically certain and can be figured out just by using reason, like mathematical truths, such as 2 plus 2 is equals to 4. On the other hand, matters of fact are truths about the world that we can only know through experience and observation, like the sun will rise tomorrow. This distinction matters a lot because Hume believed we could never be as certain about matters of fact as we are about relations of ideas. Hume's philosophy also recognizes two main sources where knowledge comes from, reason and experience, and two different kinds of knowledge, which are formal or analytical knowledge and empirical knowledge. Finally, he outlines two ideas about what makes something true, which is the correspondence theory, where an idea is true if it matches up with something in the world, and the coherence theory, where an idea is true if it fits logically together with a system of other beliefs. In the end, Hume's work serves as a reminder that our understanding of the world isn't just built on what we see and touch. It's also shaped by how we feel and what we think. His deep dive into the power of reason really solidified his position as a hugely important figure in philosophy. Expanding on the thoughts of Hume, let's shift our focus to a major shift in thinking that happened in the 20th century, which is the movement known as logical positivism. Basically, the logical positivists carried forward the idea that there are only two types of knowledge claims, which they saw as the only legitimate things for human reason to deal with. First, they embraced what they called the relation of ideas. This group covers all logic, mathematics, and formal statements that are true just by their definition. These are seen as analytic and a priori because you can figure out their truth by simply looking at the meaning of the words without needing to check the real world. A typical example is the statement, all bachelors are unmarried. If you were to deny this statement, you'd end up with a contradiction because the very meaning of bachelor already carries the idea of being unmarried. Second, they also accepted matters of fact. These are statements about the world that are synthetic, empirical, and a posteriori. You can only know if they're true by observing and experiencing them. For instance, the sky is blue. If you say the sky is not blue, you're not creating a contradiction in the same way you would by denying a relation of ideas. Instead, it's a statement that can be easily shown to be false just by looking up at the sky. The idea of truth comes in two categories. One is called coherence, which means an idea is true if it logically fits together in a system of thought. The other is correspondence, which means a fact is true if it matches up with how the world actually is. The logical positivists thought these two types, which are relations of ideas and matters of fact, were only kinds of knowledge that really counted. They figured anything that didn't fit into one of these two categories, especially statements from metaphysics or ethics, just didn't make any sense.